Don Pardo with that amazing, unique voice, and hearing him say, "Ladies and gentlemen, Dane Cook," it was like the goosebumps almost came right off my skin.
Welcome to Story and Craft. Now, here's your host, Mark Preston.
Hey, welcome back. Another episode of Story and Craft. I am Mark Preston. Thank you so much for being here today. Comedian, actor Dane Cook. Well, as a member of Gen X, let me say legendary comedian Dane Cook. He reached rock star status when it came to being a comedian. He is one of my favorite comedians. Really cool guy. You're going to enjoy the chat. We cover his career in comedy, his time on film. He's been in movies kind of like Waiting, which I think is the quintessential movie for any of us who have ever worked in a restaurant. It's spot on. Also, Dan in Real Life, Good Luck Chuck, Employee of the Month, My Best Friend's Girl. He's been in a lot of cool films. Now, also, he has a brand new comedy special called Above It All. Got to check it out. Good stuff. I was checking it out a little bit before, and it's funny, but of course it's going to be funny. It's Dane Cook. We talk about his first time on Saturday Night Live. He lived in John Belushi's old apartment. That's random. Kind of a cool thing to learn about Dane. Also, he worked with Betty White, and he shares a secret Betty White shared with him, which that alone makes this super cool for me. So, who doesn't love Betty White? And as always, if you want to know anything about the show, just head to storyandcraftpod.com. And that's where you find out everything about the show, past guests, pretty much anything. It's all there. So check it out. Also, if you would, I always ask this as a humble request, no matter what podcast platform or app you are listening on, please subscribe. That way you will get notified every time there's a new episode. And also, if you would, leave a review. Give some stars, 5 or 10 or 100. I don't know, however many you can give. Just throw some love. Why not? Okay, let's get after it. Today, it's Dane Cook Day on Story and Craft. All right, Mr. Cook.
Yo, what's up, man?
Hey, thanks on a Friday for connecting with me. I most certainly appreciate it, man. This is a cool opportunity, so I certainly appreciate it.
This is a privilege and a pleasure because I love talking shop, so you got me at a very celebratory time, man.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I told a friend of mine, my good friend Sarah, I've known for years, and I said, "Listen, I got an interview I got to do here in a sec." She's like, "Who is it today?" I said, "Dane Cook." She's like, "Oh my God, tell him I think he's sexy." So
what?
My friend Sarah says, "Yeah." So I didn't know this about her. She's like, I can almost hear the purring of the text message, So it was.
You tell her I tell your mate. She made my day. Thank you.
Very good, very good. So you're in L.A. now, right?
That is correct. I'm in my office here in my home where I also shot this special that we'll probably talk about.
I like how you're AHS alum. You're giving a shout out to your high school and your name on the screen. I like that. That's good.
I try to keep it interesting. Even the minute details. There's always room for some comedy, I think.
Indeed. Absolutely. It's the little things in life. It's so funny. I was just thinking about it the other day, and the things I've seen in the interviews I've heard, I've never heard anybody say that something which I think is really unique about you, that I think as far as you're kind of the first comedic voice in my mind for like Gen X. Kind of like I'm trying to think. You did it in the round. Was it Madison Square Garden? Was that the arena show you did?
Yeah, the first one that I did was Boston Garden for Vicious Circle.
That's right, Boston Garden. And I remember you talking about laying in bed and just like how uncomfortable it was or something laying next to somebody who's sleeping. I was like, you capture the awkwardness of being Gen X in your 20s better than anybody ever did, So... But no, I know that a lot of people came out of that generation, but you kind of like, I was like, man, he really nailed the awkwardness. And this is a compliment. It's sure shit's not sounding like it, but seriously, you kind of captured the experience of that, what it's like to be in your 20s back in the 90s.
It felt like in that era, there was some prime real estate in terms of communicating to a modern group of humans what comedy can and should be for our generation. So I do feel like I was, I guess, the bell curve there for Zeitgeist. I was like, okay, I'm gonna start talking to the next group of college kids coming up the ranks, and hopefully entertain them, and maybe that'll provide me more of a long form career as well as some long form stories that we're talking about.
Yeah, I dug it, man. And that's something I wanted to tell you that I just, as I watched you in that era, I thought, God, this guy, because I'm a George Carlin guy, and I came out of, the first guy that I can remember seeing, I know there are other people who did it, but Eddie Murphy Raw. And here you are in an arena kind of setting. I was like, okay, this guy is kind of capturing that lightning in a bottle, that, that rarefied air,
Carlin had a special in 1978 called On Location that was actually directed by Marty Kullner, who not only directed Vicious Circle, but then directed Above It All with me for the most recent release. And growing up as a student of comedy and loving George Carlin, and also appreciating aesthetically what he brought to stand-up by performing in the round, it was certainly one of the comedy architects that I looked to, Carlin, and said, man, if I could figure out a way to build a reputation in the comedy world and with my fans that I'm growing up with you, I'm not just going to be derivative and rinse and repeat. If you'll allow me, I'm going to fail and succeed right before your eyes. Then I knew that I might be able to, one day look at my family and say, I'm glad you supported me on this because we done good.
Did I say right? You have 4 or 5 sisters.
I have one full sister, and then the rest of the family it's a little Brady Bunch.
Oh, I gotcha. As far as like origin story, now I know I'm a North Dallas kid, so East Coast. I'm a little fuzzy, but it's basically Boston was where you grew up, suburban Boston area.
10 minutes north of Boston, yes, Arlington, Massachusetts.
Oh God, shit! I'm drawing a blank. I mean, comedian Boston, redheaded guy. Why is he? Whatever. I'm sorry, Bill Burr. Bill Burr. Yeah, I'm at that age now where my brain tries to access a name and it just goes like that.
Yeah, Bill Burr was in my graduating class. We both started. Well, I started in '90, and I think he came in right around '91. But myself, Bill Burr, comedian who sadly passed away, the great Patrice O'Neill, Gary Gulman, and several other cohorts. But that was our motley crew coming up out of that region in a time when stand-up was really at the tail end of its boom. The 80s comedy boom was ending when we were starting.
Yeah, there were comedy clubs like everywhere, and they always I know they all serve the same food, the same atmosphere, same kind of vibe, and then they just started kind of petering out. But yeah, doing that little bit of origin story is Boston, and you had family, siblings and stuff, but you had one full sister. Was it an older or younger sister?
Yeah, my younger sister Courtney, who's a very talented photographer in her own right, and it's funny because Courtney and I were the most like are the most like our parents, which was the perfect blend as a comedian of my dad had swagger. My dad had he was pretty intense. He was old school. He was a little. There's some dark corners there that always kept him interesting, and a bit of a ham. But on the other side, our mom was very physical, very silly, loved language, loved painting verbal pictures physically, and I kind of took both of their acts, and that's really what became my form of storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. I was about to say you are a. Some people say a wordsmith. I think you're just a storyteller. I mean, I'm telling you, I'm so glad that you've got another comedy special. It's going to be a special. Where are we going to be able to see your show?
Yeah.
I know you shot it at home, but where is that going to show up? Because I want to get that out of the gate, man. I want to know where I can find this.
Yeah. No, right now, currently, what I've done is I've always considered myself a little bit of a disruptor in the industry. I like forging my own path, and I'm really into the nitty-gritty niche of it all and being really in the grassroots with my fans. So I thought maybe if I did this entirely self-financed independently, I could then own and operate my intellectual property, and I could have as many windows or portals to sharing it as I want. So the out of the jump right now, it's at an incredible website called moment.co, and which you can find through danecook.com. If you go to danecook.com, it'll take you to the show. But the great thing about moment.co is it provided a platform similar to the old pay-per-view where you could just see the show you wanted, click on it, pay for the purchase, and that's it. You don't have to join a streamer. You don't have to download more software to your television or Apple TV. This was the opportunity to be in everybody's device, your iPad, your phone, your computer. You can watch me anywhere, and when the show's over, unless you want to watch it again, that's it. You don't have to sign up and pay any annual subscriptions. The show is the show, and I wanted everybody to have access to the show.
My kids, they discover content wherever they discover it. My youngest daughter, who's almost 17, she'll just watch videos nonstop on her phone, on YouTube, and that's great that you're doing that. So, but it's great you're coming back out with another comedy. Do we still call them comedy concerts? Is that what we call them?
Comedy special. I like calling it a comedy event because I don't just like to dole these things out. I'm very precious. I like to make sure that when I'm putting something together, it's been in the never been done before business. And when I called Marty Callner on this one, I said, Marty, I think I have something that's going to really create quite an impact. He said, what is it? I said, I want to shoot this on my front porch in L.A. and the Hollywood Hills.
What was his initial reaction when you said that?
Well, he was on my porch, and I said, well, this is the stage. And he said, he looked at me, he goes, I think this is brilliant. And I said, do you? And he goes, let's do it. And the whole idea was to create a spectacle, shoot it on IMAX quality cameras so we could upscale it for the big screen. And even though, yes, you'll probably end up watching it on a small device, we sat in a movie theater here in Los Angeles at the TCL Chinese Theater, and we got to watch it with 1,000 people on the biggest screen. My big Irish head was even bigger on this screen. So it was an incredible moment to create something that's never been done before in stand-up comedy history, which is an IMAX release of a comedy special.
That's very cool. Didn't Kevin Hart do something at his home during the pandemic, I think, also?
That wasn't his house, though. That was a fake set, a fake basement, but I shot this on my actual home of 12 years.
Going back, you said the Irish. Tell me, were your folks, are they East Coast? I mean, is that where they're from originally, or did your family kind of move in before having you there?
Yeah, my parents sadly both passed away in around 2007. And their entire lives, they lived Cambridge, Arlington, that region of the world. My mom actually ended up moving down to Delray Beach in her last years, but we lived, vacationed. Everything that I knew was, the whole world was pretty much Massachusetts or Cape Cod or Maine from time to time in the summer. But they were really instrumental in not only helping me to develop my kind of storytelling, but they were the kinds of people that you want in your life that bring value to original ideas. And what do I mean by that? Which is sometimes if you're going into territory in life where you feel like, well, nobody's really done things like this, it's real easy to say, well, that could go, belly flop, and you might waste time, money you don't have. Certainly when you're a new comedian, you don't have those things. And when I had those ideas early on in my career, I can't tell you how quickly my dad grabbed me by the shoulders and he said, if you believe you're about to do something that hasn't been done before, show me exactly what that is. And that's what my parents built me to be able to do and accomplish. And now 31 years later, we get to talk about it again. I'm
in that kind of phase. I started working in radio and doing voiceover and stuff and acting 31 years ago also. It's weird to say 31 years. I'm going, I don't know if I should say that anymore. When they were watching the trajectory of your career, were they, I don't want to say it's not confused by, God rest his soul, I have a grandfather, wonderful businessman, funny, great soul, and I could tell he didn't really understand what I did, but he supported me. I mean, did you, and towards the end, he kind of got it,
sure,
most certainly, but did your parents understand choices you made?
Oh, wow.
And because for a comedian, the lifestyle, the everything, were they just like, hey, do your thing, or were they trying to offer advice? What was going on back then?
It's a great question. I love this question. I'll tell you why. Because my dad, who was born athletic, very athletic guy, broad shoulders, and he spoke athleticism. He didn't quite understand the arts, but he knew about competition. He knew competitive spirit. And at first he was a little unsure of what his son going into the arts and comedy really entailed. But when I finally showed him, those large-scale arena shows, and I said, look, I'm like yourself. I'm in these arenas where you performed and watched sporting events, and I'm in the round with a trestle that I created to look like the old boxing ring that you used to box in. So I'm very much the athlete that you are. It took him about 10 or 15 years to finally really understand what I was doing and how it coincided with his ability. My mom, on the other hand, man, when I tell you, Mark, my mom, she was no soothsayer, but she did know my future. And at 15 years old, when I said, I'm going to play Boston Garden someday, 15, I said, I'm going to play Boston Garden. I'm going to fill Boston Garden. She said, I know. She said, I know. I know from the moment that I felt you in my womb that you're going to do something very impactful in the world. And she goes, and I knew that I needed to protect that. So there was a mom.
Well, that had to give you some momentum. That had to kind of like, to be young and hear that is a pretty big thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I haven't seen that show, and I want to go back and watch it again. But didn't she come to that show, the one we're talking about in Boston Garden? Didn't you point her out? There's one of your shows. I could be imagining this, but she came and you pointed her out. Didn't you do that? Or or am I imagining that?
I did that at many shows, but unfortunately the one show she was too ill to get to was the Boston Garden HBO show. And she was still in Delray Beach, but I flew down the next morning with the raw footage, they call it. That's just kind of like whatever they filmed that night, they threw it on a tape for me, and I brought it down, and I sat with her in her place in Florida and showed her son in front of 20,000 people at the Boston Garden, and the smile that went across her face while she was dealing with obviously a very difficult time in her illness was one that I will never not see for the rest of my life.
One of the things I always admired about you is that it kind of dovetails into a question, but it's like, if I knew my parents were sitting out in the audience, I'd be like, I almost want to feel the need to kind of meter what I was talking about. But I mean, there's nothing you're holding back. I mean, was it the content? And it was nothing bad at all, but it's not normal dinner time conversation with your parents. How did she receive the content? I mean, did she ever give you commentary? Like, were they seeing you in a new way, and were they enjoying a different side of you? That's a way of saying it.
They loved irreverence. They were irreverent people themselves, especially my mom. She could have it could turn into a bit of a pirate's den in the house from time to time. So we were cavalier with the language, but we were also lovers of language. So it could be an F-bomb coupled with a 15-point Scrabble word. So the content was never an issue. My mom was always just very adamant about let people know that there's not a modicum of malice in you, and you can get away with anything. And I'm a person who lives in a positive state of mind whenever possible, and because I never take anything negative to the stage, I knew I could probably get away with some topics that were pretty lowbrow sometimes, or out there, because people knew that I wasn't trying to be vulgar for the sake of shock value.
Was this kind of your disposition as a kid, like in school, or were you more reserved, were you more gregarious? Going back to high school, were things like junior high? I'll say junior high, because that's usually when the stuff starts happening.
No, junior high for me was introvert, very wallflower, very much so, more of an observer. Didn't really participate very much just because of social anxiety. But I do believe that all those elements actually led to me being a more nuanced storyteller, because I could see little things in human behavior, probably because I was only listening.
My daughter, my 17-year-old, has always been the same way. She can walk into a room, and I used to do a PA announcing for a pro baseball team just for fun, because the kids love baseball, and I thought it'd be fun to do for a summer or two. And she could walk into the press box, and a bunch of other people. She could read the room. Right. People would look at her and say, "Gosh, she's so shy." It's like, no, she's studying you right now. So I totally get that. Now, but when did you feel like the cliche phrase came out of your shell? When did you feel that kind of like when you got your feet underneath you and you were making some choices that you were sticking to?
Yeah, it took a while. It certainly, even though the first time I performed, I felt exhilarated and I felt some purpose. Almost immediately, I knew that I was in the right place, right time. But it took me probably about 3 or 4 years before I could confidently look somebody in the eyes and say, I'm a performer, I'm a comedian. I wasn't ashamed of it, but I didn't know how to present myself. I think I was bashful still, and I was certainly just afraid of my own voice for a long time. Unless I had the mic in my hand, I felt more like the Clark Kent, but on stage I had a bit of a Superman moment. And it took me probably about 4 or 5 years before I realized in an aha moment, I am the person I become on stage. I am that guy. I just need to allow myself to love myself a little more and be confident and let go of some of the fear.
Yeah, isn't that weird the way that happens? Because you think you're going and putting on a show, but really what you're doing is you're stripping things away more than anything.
Yeah, it's funny. My whole philosophy is life is, removing the obstacles and the hurdles that you probably already have set in front of you. Those things sometimes aren't things that appear. It's actually obstacles we run towards. And maybe the sole purpose isn't what's beyond it, but for you to work on removing that element so that you can enjoy everything beyond it.
Now, when did you start touring? How old were you?
Oh, boy. Touring? Well, I started touring around New England, tooling around in my little Chevy Cavalier in 90, 91, 92. And then
Wait, wasn't Mark Maron kind of bouncing around up there as well right about that same time? I know he went to school up there.
Yeah, Maron was the graduating class ahead of us, so he didn't pal around with us because we were the noobs. But he was already kind of staking his claim, I think, outside of Boston and New York. But I was just roaming around New England looking for college gigs, looking for pizza places or Chinese food restaurants that were offering open mics for me to, get better.
When it comes to the lifestyle of touring, I've always been kind of like, that seems like it's really cool, but then I don't know if I could live that lifestyle. What was that like when you're actually out on the road? And it's, I hear that the owners of some of the clubs can be their own peculiar ecosystem. And
right.
What was that like early on for you when you were kind of getting some momentum?
Yeah, it was lonely. It was hard because there was a lot of people in power that would not always pay you or, would try to kind of take advantage of your time or efforts. So you're kind of learning in a very small pond, what the business itself is, which is, you got to learn the legalese and you got to be able to know how to, protect yourself in those moments. But I think that before the internet, because I'm the old bull, I can talk about that, transfer moment. It was very lonely. And then once the computer came in and there was a bit more of a closeness to even the people that were back home, that alleviated a lot of that stress. But the first 5 to 7 years was really, really lonely, really hard out there.
I don't know. See, like I said, it seems like it would be cool to be in different cities, meet different people, but I don't know, it can be rough also. But it's funny you mentioned the internet. I'm sitting there going, I'll prepare sometimes for folks. I'm like, Dane Cook, I know Dane Cook. But I did a little bit, and I saw something that you're one of the first people to really embrace MySpace, if we're going OG, as a means of kind of, forging direct connections with folks. Was that just were you just immediately, when you saw MySpace and internet, I'm going to embrace this, or did somebody give you some advice and say, dude, you need to jump on this?
Yeah, it was I like to call MySpace TikTok 1.0. MySpace was the very first place where, ideas were culminated. But I looked at it immediately as, hey, people are congregating here. This is like comedy in the park. This is like when I used to walk through Faneuil Hall in Boston and somebody could be performing their act or, magic or comedy or music and gathering a little crowd on the street. And I looked at the internet as, man, that is one big crowd on the street that you have the opportunity to pal around with and hopefully build up your clientele, your fans, your business. And I would say within the first month, and I mean this is going to sound flowery and a little bit like a bad movie scene, I was languishing in LA on my computer, finding MySpace, and within a month, I went from that guy who's doing this a lot, how do I make my career, to a month later saying, I'm about to take over the world with this.
Really?
Oh, a month. 4 weeks later, after I started, I had my first 2,500 followers from zero, from sharing links of my comedy. And when I hit that 2,500, and then I hit 5,000 within 6 weeks, I sat at that computer and I said, I'm going to sit here 23 hours a day until that number is 5 million people. And we got there within about 2 years. I had 5 million people, and I didn't have to wait for Hollywood or industry or anybody anymore. I could do it myself.
Yeah, that's one of the things. It's so fascinating to me. There is a young lady. I say young lady. She's 23. She's one of the superhero people, and she said, I look just kind of generally looking around. I'm like, oh, Instagram, 1.5 million. I'm like, gee, many Christmas. Are you kidding me? I was like, how's that even? What would I do at that? That is I was already working. I was successful in radio in Dallas, but I'm making 1.5 million. That's a pretty big thing, and those kind of numbers back circa MySpace days. That's even bigger of a deal because people really hadn't embraced it quite the same way.
You would think of it almost like I describe it when I mentor young people that are building their building their online presence even today. I tell them, think of it like this: if you had a brick and mortar, and suddenly on day one, ribbon cut, 1,000 people walked into your widget shop, you would say, I need to do anything and everything possible to make sure the experience for these 1,000 people, that they go and tell one or two or three other people, this is the shop you want to come to. And I looked at it, and I still to this day look at it like this. If you have 20, 50 people that come in are interested in what you do, if you can get 50 people onto your page, guess what? You can get 50,000 people. You can get 5 million people. It's all the same. It's really the response to what it is that you're putting, the effort, the heart and soul you put into your digital brick and mortar.
And that's so funny you say mentor. That's it's kind of being at that age. And I think you literally are only a few months older than I am. I think I was born February 73. I think you're just a few months older,
Yeah. Yep.
I'm at that phase where, the mentoring thing, it's cool because I look back at the people that I looked at, these old radio dudes who were like rocking in the 60s and 70s, had the good stories to tell. When it came to mentoring, who were you looking at, either just from afar or people directly that were like saying, okay, Dane, okay, let's check it. Here's what we need to be thinking about, or what? Who are some of those people? Comedy, even outside of comedy, early on.
Well, I had my first and probably most influential person in my life was my high school drama teacher, Frank Roberts. And Frank was the first person outside of my home to look at me and say something that I never thought I'd hear, which is, you have talent. I didn't even know what to do with that. I was thrilled and terrified. I said, I do? And he said, I've been teaching class here for 20 some odd years. And I tell you, when you took that stage today and did A, B, and C, he said, you have natural ability. And then he said something which I really needed to hear. He said, but you have a lot of fear in you. And I'd like to help you to understand your fear, but I really want to help you to get on that stage and to be able to expand upon what I'm seeing when you stand up there. And I could not have asked for a better angel to come down and help me on my way in terms of the arts. My family could be supportive, but they didn't understand the business side of things, and Frank really instilled a lot of values in me that I use to this day.
So, but that is something when somebody that you respect, that you think actually is in the game, and they just know something, when they recognize and say, you can do this, or just kind of, I know my grandfather, always with a wink in his eye, would say, you're the most hard-headed person I've ever met. Because he knew fundamentally, you got to be hard-headed. You got to be just, have that torque and push through things. And he knew that's what it was going to take for me to achieve whatever I did. But comedy-wise, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think what I took from Frank and probably a little bit of my dad and mom, and assembled all these traits, what you would call a person's character. And I think what I realized and what I continue to try to grow on, and what I really like to share with young people that I talk to, is it was the ability to be no bullshit, tough as nails, assertive, with as much tenderness and heart as you could ever expect or want from somebody. And if you can find that ability to be that honest and give people your power in some sense, because you're tough enough to take it back or stand up for it, I think that's a nice way to be able to pivot and move with the world that's ever changing around you. You got to be tough, but you got to have a lot of love in you and a lot of heart.
I could not agree more. So there's this quote I like. I'm mangling it, but it says, basically make decisions from love, not fear. One of the things that's funny when Emma, I'm sorry, my daughter, my almost 17-year-old was in her appointment. I'm sitting there just, where's Dane showing up? Like in a podcast, and how cool it was that you were Bob Saget's last interview on his podcast, and I'm like that was such a great thing to hear, because nobody said anything ever bad about Bob Saget. I mean, to have that reputation. Just touching on that for a moment, I spoke right after he passed away. Another comedian, Craig Shoemaker. I spoke with him, and we're just, because it was right after he had passed away. What was your feeling sitting down talking with him, and just your opinion of Bob Saget just in general?
Well, the conversation, working back from there, was spirited and unbridled and very loving, and he shared stories with his viewers and myself that I thought were so, I would even say, poetic. Beautiful sentiment about Robin Williams, stories that he'd never shared before. And it really touched my heart that he was, sharing those.
That was, by the way, for those who haven't heard it yet, go by all means, go listen to it. He's talking about, he was on the set of, what was the movie? It was a big ship. What was that? Hook, yeah. And then Steven Spielberg, of course. And so he just played around. I'm like, that was such a cool story. And it's cool whenever somebody's like, I've never told the story before, but... And to have Bob Saget tell you that. But
you should.
Had you spent time with him before? I mean, leading up to that, or had he been in your ecosystem?
Yeah, I knew Bob for so many years, and he was actually, I met him in Boston in the mid '90s when I was coming up, and I actually got to say to him when he was on top of the entertainment world in terms of Full House, and he had America's Funniest Videos, and we all knew that as a stand-up, he'd not only broken through, but he was wealthy, he was popular, he had taken comedy to this place we all wanted to be. And I remember saying to him, you're a real inspiration to me. And this is when I was just, wet behind the ears back in Beantown. When I finally landed in LA at 98, we bumped into each other at the comedy club Laugh Factory probably 2 weeks later, and he just became a fast friend, and we just continued over the years to have that rapport. He was nice enough to invite me into the Sclerodorma charity events, and I would try to help him out and do some shows with him to bring some attention to that. I mean, I was so proud to be able to help him when he needed me, but even more so to say he was my buddy, and that after he passed, of course, I was so gobsmacked and shocked. But to have had that last conversation was such a beautiful gift.
Yeah, it was. In fact, I think Bill Burr did the intro to it, if I'm not mistaken. It was kind of the intro to show, hey, by the way, I guess that's a spot normally where Bob Saget would have done his intro to the show. But
I think it was Bill. I think Bill's company was running the podcast at the time, and so I never saw the intro, but that would make sense that maybe Bill had recorded something for his comedy podcast company, as to say, we're presenting this.
Yeah, I mean, it was a wonder. I still haven't had a chance to hear the whole thing because my daughter got in the car and she, of course, wants music on. Just one more note on the comedy thing in the background. Who are the guys that you were when you started? When you put it in fifth gear and you're really going, who are the guys that you were checking in with? Who was kind of your tribe that you were either looking up to, or guys that you were like, you wanted to go see their shows?
Wow. Well, there was absolutely a lot of comics once I landed in New York City that I was seeing around me in real time were, fast becoming the next superstars in comedy. And you name a comic, whether it's, Dice or Seinfeld or Roseanne, everybody from that era that really 80s, 90s was blowing up.
Wasn't that amazing era? I mean, do you think we're going to get an era like that again? I don't mean to cut you off, but you mentioned something. Do you think that's going to take a swing back? We're going to see an era like that in comedy come back?
Yeah, I think we will. I just think it's probably going to be in that kind of newfangled tech way. And I think in some regards we're seeing it now because comics are so much more entrepreneurial. They're more 24-hour-a-day, multi-hyphenated business people. And so I think that the era of comedy meeting whatever the next version of what we're doing here is probably going to, have its moment again in terms of changing the landscape of stand-up.
And those guys that you were watching, like Carlin was still around back then, and yet who are people that you wanted to go see? Who are people like, I want to be in the audience watching and picking up on that energy?
Oh yeah, well Carlin, I saw Carlin at the South Shore Music Center, and a week later after I was at the Hampton Beach Casino, he was there. Carlin was just a major contributor to the kind of comedy I wanted to do. When I got to LA, Pryor was still here, and he was still doing some shows, even though he'd been dealing with MS. He was around Los Angeles. I was desperately waiting for Eddie Murphy to perform stand-up again. We all were. We all still are. But he was somebody that, I definitely looked up to. But if I'm going to be very, transparent, Mark, the thing that was probably interesting and difficult was there wasn't anybody from my era that I was the one at the front of that moment, except for maybe Chappelle.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was getting at, because there was no template.
There was no template.
Contemporary template. Yeah.
No,
and you were doing something. When I saw you on stage, I would say Dice in a way a little bit earlier, because he could command that big arena thing,
right.
And he had but I don't want to say shtick because that demeans what I think.
But even Dice was Dice was in the pre-internet realm, so that was all still kind of like the old Standard Network or HBO. But nobody had done this thing where it was completely outside of the industry, putting the sword on you and saying, you've been christened, you're in. It was like the self-made era I was really at the precipice of, but I was watching Chappelle next to me because we both came up together out of New York, and I was seeing this incredibly gifted comedian saying, all right, him and I seem to be having the experience of leading the charge of the next generation of stand-ups.
I think comedy it is very digestible and important social commentary. That's like, if I was to put on a sociologist's hat and pretend like I was one for a moment, I'm like, if you look back over Carlin, like right now, did he not get it right or what? If you look at our current era we're living in, things he was commenting on are really kind of on point right now.
Yes.
But now the transition, though, I don't want to call it transition, because I think you were doing two things in tandem, both on stage and acting. When did you just go, I'm doing a comedy thing, I want to do some acting? I mean, how did the whole being on camera thing manifest for you?
Well, Mark, a lot of that really just came from people who were fans. Some of these producers and directors were kind of coming up the ranks in their own right, and some of them had been watching me since their college years, So I started getting phone calls when I was putting asses in seats. That was the early version of what you would say today, like algorithm data, like how many asses in seats do you got? Once you start filling those rooms up, well, producers and directors and people outside of the normal comedy club spectrum start hitting you up and saying, you want to have some fun in our sandbox over here? And I was very game.
Just it is a side note, because I've forgotten you'd done Saturday Night Live. And I know, of course, that was kind of before you were doing a lot of stuff on camera. But
sure.
What's the Saturday Night Live experience? Because for me as a kid, I don't know about you, but I was watching that. I mean, my babysitter when I was real little was cool, let me watch it.
Yeah.
That was an incredibly influential, it was, I remember all the way back to Billy Crystal, It was kind of like that first generation. What was it like actually doing the show?
Okay, so a couple interesting things. Great question. A couple interesting things were, in LA, I was living in Belushi's last apartment that he lived in till he passed away up the street at the Chateau. So I had Belushi's apartment, and when I tell you,
really,
an incredible.
Wait, with the actual apartment or a complex?
I was in the actual apartment that he lived in for several years. In fact, it was still painted the color he had painted it when he had lived there, which was blueberry black, if that's even a color that you can picture. It was the coolest, funkiest wall paint in this really old, historic 90-year-old building, original architecture on the ceilings. It was just like an edifice unlike anything you'd seen before. And so I'm living there, and I'm playing music. I'm playing a lot of, blues music, and I'm kind of feeling like, oh, wow, this whole Belushi thing is kind of flowing through me. And when I finally got the opportunity and got the phone call after the success of Retaliation, my sophomore album, I was in New York City. I was at Rockefeller Plaza, and the very first night that they invited me to work on the show to write, with the writers, I took a break at about midnight. I left everybody's office, and by myself, I walked down the corridors of Rockefeller Plaza on that Saturday Night Live stage, walked through the stage, walked through the hallways, looked at every picture as close as I could. Chevy Chase, Gilda Radner, Dan Aykroyd, Eddie Murphy, Steve Martin, Carlin. And I just remember feeling that moment of standing in the hall, looking at these thousands of pictures and saying, now my picture is going to be on the wall here with some of these incredibly gifted people that have entertained me. And I can hope that maybe someday somebody else will stand in that hall and go, oh, shit. Oh, that's Dane Cook. I like Dane. That's great.
That is, it's so funny because you say those names, and I think just because of age, I think there are going to be some younger people listening who aren't as familiar. That, their OG is maybe Will Ferrell days or something.
Right.
But to say those names and then being a real little kid and watching that was almost just transformative. I'm like, nothing on TV is. I shouldn't have been watching it. I was too young.
And when I was there, not only was it still that feeling of, yes, we had the Will Ferrells and you had the Kristen Wiggs, Amy Poehler was there, Bill Hader was brand new when I was there. But I will tell you something. When I stood backstage waiting for them to call my name, the first time I did the show, but he was gone by the time I did the next season. But the first time I did the show, Don Pardo, the voice of the original Saturday Night Live, he was still there. So meeting him, chatting with him, my dad was in broadcasting for years. So even though meeting all the cast was amazing, to me, meeting the great Don Pardo with that amazing, unique voice and hearing him say, ladies and gentlemen, Dane Cook. It was like the goosebumps almost came right off my skin. It was so amazing.
Did you just? Oh man, I'm just trying to live vicariously through you in that moment. Like you're looking at a door and you're about to walk through it, and you hear that, and they did it live. He announced, and stuff I've done like that every now and then. It's like I always like pre-recorded because I'm so used to recording day in day out. When you're there doing it live, he's just. I don't know how many years he did it, but I think he's certainly set a record. But you said your dad was in broadcasting. What did he do?
Yeah, he did some color commentary stuff, and after his athletic career was over, he just loved being a part of sports in any way. So he did some local stuff around Boston, and he had an incredible voice and an incredible vernacular. My dad, so he was a pretty good storyteller in his own right.
Yeah, when you talk about your mother and your father, I get how you got to where you are, and you talk about your mother telling stories. But one last note, I'd love to talk about a couple of films, but I got to know, coming from radio, one of the cringiest things, and I found a lot of success. I had a syndicated show and everything, but when I was younger, one of the cringiest things, and I'm not going to say where I was working, but when comedians came by to promote their thing, I got to know you don't have to say who, but promoting a show in a city when you go do the morning shows, what's one of the more peculiar stories that you encountered showing up at a radio station, them asking you to do something weird like, turn it on, Dane, do your thing? What is one of those stories, if you still remember?
Yeah, no, because a lot of radio is something that they call, they want good radio. And that means even if you come in, I don't drink, but if you came in drunk or if you came in talking out of school, they want to set you up with a net to grab a story. And that's really their mission statement, I mean, yeah, they want to plug your show or whatever, but they certainly would rather have you come on and say something salacious because they know that was going to get the clicks or back then the listens, right? The tune-ins.
They're going to run it in promos all throughout the day.
I was terrified of public speaking still, even at that point. Even in like early 2000s, I was so much more comfortable either on stage or online, but I was still not into the idea of doing morning radio. So here's something that I don't think I've ever told anybody. You're getting an exclusive right here. I never did morning radio except for a couple of favors because I didn't want a gotcha moment. And I worked extra double overtime online. So if I knew I was going into a specific region, I was like, I'm not doing radio. I don't want to do radio. So I would work double extra overtime online to make sure my numbers were robust. And I skipped for about 10 years doing morning radio at a time in my life where I guarantee they would have wanted a few gotcha moments in there. So I don't have a good bad story for you, but I can tell you I worked my ass off to not have to do morning radio.
Well, one of the reasons why I like doing this, the podcast, is I like it better in the format of radio. There's more time to really get the story built in there. And
right.
I hope that folks that are listening that are, I don't care what they're doing, entertainment, I mean, whatever job, I mean, that really, there's a work ethic. And you've got to be a conscious participant in your own success. And it sounds like you were making choices early on. That's actually very cool that, luckily you had the internet thing going on. But I remember a guy I mentioned Craig Shoemaker. He had come up a couple times, and I remember I was helping Brian Regan record a promo, and I didn't know he does this whole show clean. I was like, well, that makes my job easier because the other guys, I'm trying to record the promo with them. They're, I can't air that,
sure.
But no, you're talking about getting in the on camera thing. Now, I got to tell you, one of my favorite movies that just my son, my youngest two, my son and my daughter, we watched it the other day, but Employee of the Month. I think that you and Dax Shepard somehow that was a perfect pairing of just dudes.
Right.
It's just one of those movies. If it's on, I'm going to watch it. And there's just those 10 movies. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's in the middle of the movie. I'll just can just start watching it.
Sure.
You were some of the height of your powers, and so was Jessica Simpson, and they were, what was it like kind of shooting that when somebody says to you, or even going back a step further when your agent goes, we got a show that basically takes place in a Costco, what was that experience like overall?
Yeah, when I think of it, it was charming. It was a charming film, a charming experience. I certainly felt like I was living a charmed life because my career was certainly taking on, new frontiers. When I think about that movie, I had hoped it would be one of those films, and it has become one of those films, like some of the 80s movies that I loved growing up, that they may not have been anything critical darling or anything like that, but it was a feel-good movie. And it's nice to be able to talk about it all these years later, because not everything that you do ends up being talked about years later, to say, hey, that's one of the ones that someday I can show my kids. And it always feels like we captured a spirit and a happiness and a real joy in there. And we had a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, Dax seems like just an intelligent wordsmith, the guy. It seems like the two of you would be, if y'all were talking at a party, I'd try to find my way over in that conversation, Yeah,
I got to share a lot of space with him over the years on a couple of fronts. And, he's earned the success that he has today because he's one of those guys. He's curious individual. Curious people who have talent, that's a nice combination.
Waiting is welcome to the Thunderdome, bitch. Is just one of those phrases that I rattled that off to one of my kids the other day. They didn't get the context, but that Ryan Reynolds was he was skyrocketing, and then that had to have been a pretty fun set. I know the guy Todd Volts who. Well, when the lady sent the steak back, and y'all were all adding your extra ingredients, Todd has got spit on the steak. What was that? I got to know what it's like filming Waiting. I'll fanboy on that one because that place is now a Verizon, believe it or not. What was it like making that film?
Yeah, it was. That one was like. I felt like a bunch of us were in the fast lane of our lives and careers, and then suddenly we all zoomed through this one shenanigans set. Everybody kind of ran in, had a bunch of ideas. We all worked, if you know anything about the life of an actor or a comedian, you're working in restaurants, you're slinging food, you're working in the kitchen. So we all had brought a lot of character to our characters. And I think that Mark, more than anything else, when I think of that movie, I think of the word improvisation, like most of those lines, like the "Welcome to Thunderdome," that was something I've been saying on stage from time to time, and it was a great opportunity to just go in and have fun with a bunch of people that were all on the come up.
Yeah, because I remember there's one scene somebody comes in right before closing, and it reminded me of my brief time waiting tables at 19 to 20.
Yeah.
And you take the cutting board, you start slamming it up. And I was like, dude, I've seen that happen before. I've actually been in the kitchen, and I've been I was a waiter. I'm watching the guy. I'm like, if I go into to eat anywhere and it's somewhat close to closing, I tell the waiter to tell the people in the kitchen, hey, I'm so sorry. I know you're about to close. Because I'm like, I don't want anything happening like what y'all did to that steak.
I had based that character Floyd off of a bartender that worked in one of the bar/comedy places who used to get really miffed when if it wasn't a customer that he already knew, like one of the tried and trues, like the norm on this end of the stool, he just didn't like anybody new. He was set in his ways even in the establishment, and his off-color remarks were just had us all laughing. And I remember thinking, man, there's a little bit of this guy that I want to put into Floyd.
If anybody wants to know what it's like when you work at a restaurant, you're that age, that kind of place, that movie captured it, certainly. And now, before I get going, I like to ask my 7 questions. I do it with everybody, a little extra get to know you, kind of fun. The first question I got is what is your favorite comfort food?
Is that like a meal or the dessert?
Well, no, it's kind of like, let's say you're on, let's go back to your tourgasm days. You know, you're on the bus. It's something like, maybe you've had a shit day or whatever. Something that's just going to bring you back home. You've been on the road too long. Something that just, you got good vibes when you eat it. Whatever. Hey, it could be dessert. Could be anything, really.
Oh, okay. Well, then it's got to be, you can name an East Coast pizza place, and that would be it. I love a good cheese pie.
Is the real thin kind of New York style, or do you like the deeper dish?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. No. I don't like when there's like tiers of food. I like it very thin.
Or there's strata in your food.
Looks like they ironed it before they brought it up.
Indeed, absolutely. Now, next question. If you're to sit down with 3 people, there's going to be 4 of y'all, coffee, just going to be talking story for a couple hours. Who are those 3 people, living or not? Who would you like to have sitting down with you?
Living or not, I've always wanted to dream up a conversation with Elvis. I've always been infatuated with his life, both as a business person and as a performer. I know a lot about him.
He was the original brand, man. Like there was some genius in how he crafted his brand.
Oh, absolutely, very, very like the whole TCB of it all. And so Elvis, George Carlin, and I've always been a big lover of all Meryl Streep's work. And I just love her approach on performance. I love her approach in how she carries herself in life. I've never had the opportunity to meet her. I saw her across a room at a Hollywood event once, and I was too trepidatious to go up. But those would be my 3.
Everything she does is amazing. But have you seen Don't Look Up on Netflix? Her president is one of my all-time favorite on-screen presidents ever.
Incredible.
Now, the next question I got is when you were a kid, who was your first celebrity crush?
My first celebrity crush, I remember having a crush on Christina Applegate when Married with Children was on. And then, of course, she later on went on to be hilarious with Will Ferrell in Anchorman.
Before I forget, because I made a note, I wanted to ask you one thing for sure. You were on a show with Betty White. Do you have a couple quick notes of what it was like to be? Betty White acted just like my grandmother. And it was the craziest thing. So my grandmother passed, but Betty White was still around, and it was kind of like she always reminded me of my grandma. It was a great memory. Do you have any Betty White story at all from your time with her?
I played Betty White's grandson, and Marie Osmond actually played my mom. And I was on a series with them for a year. And I will tell you this about Betty White. So forget about her illustrious career, but Golden Girls was already like one of the funniest sitcoms ever. I mean, just to this day, you can watch any of those episodes and it's hilarious. So I was already walking into the situation as such an incredible fan. I would say the first word to describe Betty White, enchanting. Enchanting, the atmosphere she creates, and then once you get to know her demeanor and of course her storytelling is unparalleled. Working with her, I will tell you my favorite story. I've told it a couple times, but one day I wanted to know a little bit about Golden Girls, and I said, Betty, I think I asked her, did you all realize how incredible you were? Did you know when you were walking to set for filming day or live day? And she said, I will tell you one thing that I remember about pretty much every week going to that show. She said there was always line changes at the end because the writers were so good that they would change a line last minute. And she said, and there were so many things changing that we didn't always have all the time to learn everything we needed to know in terms of the line changes. She said, sit down, watch any episode of Golden Girls. And she said, look for this. And this is going to knock you out. Ready? She said, whenever you see us holding a sugar packet in our hands or if you see us holding the mug and talking to someone and looking in as we take a sip, she said we would write the lines we couldn't remember inside the coffee mug on white tape, or we would write the line on the sugar packets. And if you watch that show, you will see so many moments when Blanche or they stare at that packet before they open it, or they look in that mug, and it's a fun Easter egg to go and watch that show now, knowing that.
I think now a lot of folks are going to start just like, okay, got to go watch it now, and like it's a whole new dimension, you know.
She was the biggest. She was truly, and I learned probably more from her about acting for television, certainly, than anybody else in my career.
Oh, yeah, the thing she did with Ryan Reynolds for the movie, was it The Proposal?
Yeah.
That promo she did was like, oh, that was just like, just flipping him off. That was just brilliant.
Yeah.
Now, next question. Now, if you're going to be living, let's say, on an exotic island, somewhere you actually want to be, but there's no streaming, no nothing, you've got to go OG, bring your favorite CD, your favorite album, and a DVD of your a movie. You know, you're going to enjoy it's you know, it's not rough living on this island. But what's the album? What is the movie you want to bring with you?
Oh my goodness! Oh boy, I was hoping you were going to say book.
Hey, you know, I have a lot of people that say that too. You know, you can substitute one out with a book, most certainly.
If it had to be a film, I love Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. I've watched it way too many times, and I adore it.
You know, it's funny. I would say that's come up a good number of times when I ask that question. That one movie.
Love it, because it's got everything. Book. I love Stephen King's The Dark Tower, The Gunslinger.
Now, the next question is, if you were from stem to stern when you first wake up to put your head down on the pillow at night, what are the component parts of a perfect day for you?
Starting off with affirmations. I do it every day, you know, making sure that I always stay grateful. And what does that mean? Gratitude for me is being able to take the energy and the enthusiasm that I always seem to have and trying to bolster somebody else with it. And not just what I want to see come to fruition, but how can I seek somebody out that I know is like maybe trying to figure out their path forward, and what can I do to try to stimulate their ideas and enthusiasm. And then by the end of the day, man, I think more than anything, it's always realizing that the words that you speak and the way that you treat people, when you put your head on your pillow, that's really the only thing that you'll ever really take with you at the end of that day when you're getting in bed and settling down. You're not going to think so much about what you did or what you accomplished. I think you think and you reminisce more about how did I treat people? How did I impact people? I don't even think people realize that they are thinking those things sometimes because they might be embroiled in something stressful or dramatic. But I always like to recognize and acknowledge I was good to people today, and it feels good when that was reciprocated.
Well, when you were a kid, do you think you were more kind of in your head? You know, does that make sense? Like, were you kind of one of those people who was really in your head with your thoughts and just processing?
I just wanted to be loved. I just really wanted to be loved and accepted. And I really wanted to feel like I never understood why I didn't quite fit in, but I understand now. And it was because I was supposed to learn and understand even more than I thought I needed to know about empathy and what it feels like to be lonely and to be alone. Because a lot of my act and a lot of what I try to put back into it is for that kid who was like me. I want someone to see something in me where they go, you know what? Maybe I can have an impact in my community or beyond. And I really hope that that's, you know, the message that most people take even from my comedy. It's about just making you feel
I mean,
good.
I most certainly there's always been something, a word my kids have heard from me a lot is kindness. It is. I mean, that's kind of like everything, you know. And it's and we didn't really bring it. I'm not going to do a deep dive at all. But I know for folks that I know have heard interviews, you brought up the situation or the manifestation of what happened with your brother, and feeling taken advantage of. I had, without going into how sausage is made, I had a similar. I don't have any siblings, but I had a similar kind of a familial experience, and that's something that. Man, does that cause you to really do some introspection, and you could stew on it or process it and move beyond it and like integrate, and how you've discussed it, I've heard in the past. I have great admiration for that because there was, like I said, it's got to be something that really can shake your foundation or make your foundation more solid. I don't know. Would that be a good way of putting it? I don't know. Because I hear you talk about it. It's like, I identify with that.
I think some of the most traumatic moments in your life, some of the most capsizing moments, they define your character. And to put it, I guess, kind of in something more bite-sized, it made me believe that nothing is ever falling apart. It's only falling together. And if you stop halfway, it seems like it fell apart. But if you can see things through, even if it's something that feels like quote-unquote failure, or it's something quote-unquote destructive, it may be the very thing that you needed to clear the path for what is good.
I could not agree with you more. And it was funny when my kids and I watched Hawaii Five-0. That was kind of our family thing when it was on. And you came on, and the character you played, now I had known the stories like, this is a little bit of you have some source material for this, playing Danny's brother on Hawaii Five-0. Did you find that did you kind of use some of your own life and bring it into, this charming guy that's, was that kind of the case?
It's funny enough, it wasn't actually so much of my home life that I brought into it, but, there were shysters and there was people across the landscape in the world of stand-up that, would just take advantage, bad business. When you're a young comic, there's no formal contract and an attorney to make sure that, everything is precision. A lot of good faith that turns into, you not being able to pay the rent on time because, somebody who's holding the check, 86 is out of there. So I think I took a lot more from some of the early dark corners of my career and put it into that character.
Greatly admire the fact you held on to, positive vibes and just great outlook. I appreciate that. Now, real quick, last two questions is if you weren't doing this, what would you be doing career-wise?
I know. I love design. I love when I first started doing stand-up, I was creating my own flyers and artwork and fonts. And if I didn't ever take a stage, I'd probably be designing, something for a banner for a podcast or graphic design, graphic arts.
Do you still play with that? Is it still something that kind of gives you the little, creative fun?
I love it. And to this day, if I'm working with a fulfillment center or somebody who's doing my social media managing, I still like to say, I found a cool font today, or maybe we could, play with the vectors and do A, B, and C. So I do help with the theme of whatever it is that I'm putting out. Now,
did you design the Superfinger logo? Just curious. Was that?
I did. I drew that out. That was actually a design that that's so interesting you asked me that. I just went into a storage facility that I hadn't cleaned in about 12 years, and I found some of my original designs for what would be the Superfinger, which I had retired in 2010 officially, but from 2000 to 2010, that was like my Rolling Stones lip tongue. That was everywhere.
I love the fact you had it on the stage and the different camera angles. It was just, it was rock star. I'll leave it at that.
It was a lot of fun. I grew out of it, but for a good period of time, it was really an identifying factor with my brand at that time.
Yeah, maybe we should bring it back at some point in time. Just throwing it out there, just because I dig it.
You never know.
Now, the last question: if you were to jump in your DeLorean and you head back to when you were 16 years old, what piece of advice or guidance would you want to give you at that age, either to set you up for success in the future or to make life in that moment even better? What piece of advice would you want to pass along?
Oh, man. Just continue to listen to your mother, because my mom was like my compass. She had an absolute, complete understanding of all of the abilities that I had before I even knew what abilities were, and she knew where I was lacking in the words to pump me up and to build me up. So I think more than anything, I would say what I say now, which is breathe and believe.
Breathe and believe. Yeah, that's That's what, whenever I do on camera acting, it's two things I forget. I got to remember to breathe. Because I tell folks at the moment between when one of the ADs says "lock it up, get quiet," between that when the director says "action," my anxiety is like flying up. Now, real quick, name of the show that it's Above It All, correct?
That's right.
It's Above It All, and just DaneCook.com. all the info's up there. Totally. So that's wonderful. But man, I so appreciate you spending some time with me. I have been a fan, not just what you do on stage, what you're doing in life. And by the way, as my people say, Mazel Tov on the engagement.
Oh, thank you.
That is awesome.
Thank you so much. Never been happier. So thank you.
Your happiness, man. I know you've worked hard for it. So when I saw that, I was like, good for him, man.
Thanks, man. I'm loving it. We're having a really, really wonderful engagement, and to be able to talk about something like this. And by the way, thank you for having me on, because I love talking shop. And sometimes on other podcasts, it always turns into like just funny or anecdotes, and to be able to really, get into the nitty gritty with you today was really delightful. So thank you.
It's more than my pleasure. But like I said, I've been a fan. It's been a great career to watch. And like I said, I was watching Wi-Fi with kids see pop up. I'm like fucking loving seeing this guy show up. And but much success to you, man. Health, happiness, prosperity, all you can get. And hopefully we'll have an opportunity to catch up down the line. And again, thank you so much for taking time out to spend time with me.
You got it, Mark. Enjoy your weekend, all right?
Okay, there you go, Dane Cook. Man, I really enjoy this chat. I cannot lie. Dane's always been one of my favorite comedians. And if you're a member of Gen X, Dane kind of slides right in that sweet spot of memories of back in the day, but he coming back with a new comedy special. Again, it is called Above It All. Check it out, DaneCook.com. All the details right there. Check out the comedy special, because Dane, he hasn't lost a step. Great show. That's it for today. Thank you again for coming by, hanging out with me. Please, by all means, head over to storyandcraftpod.com. Anything you want to learn about the show, go right there. Subscribe, if you would, on your podcast app. That way you get notified every time there's a new episode. That's it for me. I'm going to head out, grab a bite to eat. I know I always say that, but inevitably, whenever I wrap up a show, I'm always hungry. So, hey, go have yourself a great rest of your week or weekend, whatever you're up to. And I'll check you next time right here on Story and Craft.
That's it for this episode of Story and Craft. Join Mark next week for more conversation right here on Story and Craft. Story and Craft is a presentation of Mark Preston Productions, LLC. Executive producer is Mark Preston. Associate producer is Zachary Holden. Please rate and review Story and Craft on Apple Podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. You can subscribe to show updates and stay in the know. Just head to storyandcraftpod.com and sign up for the newsletter. I'm Emma Dillon. See you next time, and remember, keep telling your story.